My wife went to a nightclub and said, "Don't like it? Then divorce me." What I said next made her rush back home. I said okay. That's it. That's what broke her. Not a fight. Not a threat. Not tears or begging or slamming doors. Just one word, spoken quietly, from a man who had finally run out of reasons to hold on. She'd been standing in the hallway in that red dress, the one she bought without telling me, the one she'd been saving for a night she knew I wouldn't approve of. Her friends were waiting outside. I could hear the car engine running. She had her clutch in one hand and her phone in the other, and she looked at me the way you look at something you've already decided to leave behind. And when I asked her not to go, not because I was controlling, not because I wanted to cage her, but because this wasn't the first time, wasn't the second, wasn't even close to the fifth, she tilted her head and said it like she'd been rehearsing it for months. "Don't like it? Then divorce me." And I looked at her, really looked at her, and something in me went quiet. Not the quiet of defeat. The quiet of clarity. "Okay," I said. She laughed. Actually laughed. Like it was a bluff. Like I was the same man who'd been swallowing his pride for 3 years, who'd been making excuses to his mother, lying to his friends, pretending the cracks weren't there. She grabbed her bag, rolled her eyes, and walked out. The door closed behind her. I sat down at the kitchen table. And I started making calls. I need you to understand something before I keep going. I need you to understand what I was before that night, because if you don't, none of this will make sense. I was the husband who cooked dinner when she worked late. The one who remembered her sister's birthday when she forgot. The one who drove 40 minutes in the rain to pick her up from a party she hadn't invited me to, smiled at her friends, and said nothing on the way home when she smelled like someone else's cologne. I was the man who told himself, she's just finding herself, and marriage is hard, and love means giving people room. I was the man who confused tolerance with devotion and silence with strength. Her name is Priya. We met 11 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. She was laughing at something across the room, genuinely laughing, the kind that crinkles your whole face, and I thought, I want to be the reason she laughs like that. We dated for 2 years. Got married in a ceremony that made our mothers cry. Moved into a house with a backyard we had plans for. For the first 4 years, it was real. It was good. She was sharp, funny, effortlessly warm, and she loved me in a way I felt in my chest. We talked about kids. We talked about growing old. We talked about all of it like it was already decided, already written, already ours. Then something shifted. Slowly. The way a house settles, you don't notice the cracks until one day the door doesn't close right anymore. She started going out more. That wasn't the problem. I wasn't the kind of man who needed his wife home every night. But the going out became something else. It became later nights, vaguer explanations, a rotation of friends I'd never met, a phone she never left face up anymore. It became plans that didn't include me not because she needed space, but because I had quietly become inconvenient. I brought it up once in year 5. She cried. Told me I was insecure. That I was trying to control her. That I didn't trust her. I apologized. I actually apologized, for asking. For noticing. For feeling. That was my first mistake. The second was believing her. Here's what I didn't know then. I didn't know she'd been talking to someone. Not just talking, texting in the bathroom, saving a contact under a woman's name, showing up home at 2 a.m. glowing in a way that had nothing to do with dancing. I didn't know because I didn't want to know. Because knowing would mean deciding. And deciding would mean losing the version of my life I'd been protecting. But it gets worse. My brother-in-law, her sister's husband, a quiet man named Dev who I've always respected, pulled me aside at a family dinner 8 months before that night in the hallway. We were standing outside while the women were inside. He handed me a beer, looked at the ground for a long moment, and said, "I don't want to be the one to tell you this. But I'd want someone to tell me." He'd seen her. At a restaurant in a neighborhood neither of them lived in. Sitting across from a man. Holding his hand across the table. He described her laugh, the same laugh I'd fallen in love with at a wedding 11 years ago. The crinkle your whole face kind. I thanked him. I went back inside. I ate dinner. I drove home. I lay in bed next to her and stared at the ceiling and told myself every lie a person tells themselves when the truth is too heavy to carry. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Dev misread it. Maybe I'm overreacting. I never said a word to her. I just started shrinking. Making myself smaller. Asking for less. Hoping that if I became easier to love, she'd choose me again. I cooked more. I complained less. I swallowed every question that rose in my throat. And she took it. She took all of it. And then she asked for more. The nightclub situation hadn't started that night. 3 months earlier, she'd started going out every other weekend. Always girls' nights. Always the same vague answer when I asked where. I stopped asking. I told myself I was being mature. That was a lie I was telling myself to avoid the truth. I was terrified of the answer. Then one Saturday she came home at 4 a.m. I was sitting in the living room. I hadn't slept. She looked at me with something I can only describe as irritation, not guilt, not embarrassment, not the softness of someone who knew they'd worried you. Irritation. Like I was the problem. Why are you still up? I was worried. I'm an adult. I know. I'm going to bed. She walked past me. Didn't touch me. Didn't look back. I sat in the living room for another hour. I thought about Dev's face at that family dinner. I thought about the contact saved under a woman's name. I thought about 3 years of apologies for feelings I was allowed to have. I thought about the man I used to be. The one with a spine. And something started changing in me. Slowly. Like a dial turning. The night of the red dress, 2 weeks after the 4 a.m. incident, was not the first time she'd said something cutting before walking out. But it was the first time she'd handed me a door and told me to walk through it. Don't like it? Then divorce me. I think she expected me to chase her. I think the entire arc of our last 3 years had trained her to expect exactly that. Me, at the door, calling her name, asking her to wait. Me, folding. Me, softening. Me, making it easy for her to keep doing what she was doing without ever facing a single consequence. She didn't know the dial had turned. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for maybe 10 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. We'd had a brief conversation 2 weeks earlier, just a consultation, just information, I'd told myself, but this time I said something different. I want to start the process. Then I called my brother. Then my father. Then I sat back down and I wrote, by hand, in a notebook, every single thing I remembered. Every late night. Every vague answer. Every time I'd apologized for asking. Every time I'd swallowed something I should have said out loud. I wrote for 2 hours. By the time I was done, she still wasn't home. She got home at 1 a.m. I was in bed. Not asleep, I wasn't going to sleep, but in bed, calm, still. She came in quietly, like she was expecting me to be asleep or expecting a fight she could dismiss. She slipped into the bathroom. I heard the water run. I heard her opening and closing drawers. She came out in her sleep clothes and slid into bed without a word. I said, I called Arun tonight. Arun is my lawyer. She went very still. What? You said don't like it, then divorce you. I'm taking you up on it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. You're joking. I'm not. Over a night out? And there it was. The reframe. The way she'd been reframing everything for 3 years, minimizing, shrinking, making the real issue disappear behind a version of events where I was the unreasonable one. It's not about tonight, I said. You know that. Marcus. I'm not angry. I'm not yelling. I've made a decision. She sat up. I could feel the energy in the room change, feel her trying to recalibrate, trying to find the version of me she knew how to manage. We should talk about this. We should have talked about it 3 years ago, I said. I'm done talking. I rolled over. Turned off the lamp. She didn't sleep. I know because I didn't either. But for the first time in years, the sleeplessness wasn't from anxiety. It was from relief. The next morning she was still home when I came downstairs. That surprised me. I expected her to leave, to go to a friend's place, to put distance between herself and the conversation, to buy time the way she always had. Instead, she was sitting at the kitchen table. No phone. No coffee. Just sitting, in a way I hadn't seen her sit in years, still, unguarded, small. She looked up when I walked in. I don't want a divorce, she said. I put the kettle on. I didn't answer right away. Marcus. I don't want this. What do you want, Priya? She opened her mouth. Closed it. I don't know, she finally said. And I believed her. That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years, maybe the first genuinely honest thing. She didn't know. She'd been chasing something she couldn't name and bleeding our marriage dry in the process, and she genuinely, in that moment, did not know what she wanted. The problem was, I did. I want honesty, I said. I want to know about the man Dev saw you with. I want to know how long it's been. I want to know all of it. Not a version of it. All of it. Her face changed. Dev told you. 8 months ago. Marcus. 8 months ago, I said again. And I said nothing. I gave you 8 months to tell me yourself. You didn't. She started crying. Real crying, not the managed tears she'd used in past arguments to shift the dynamic, but something that came from deeper, that shook her shoulders. I watched it happen and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Grief. Just grief. I made a mistake, she said. I know. It was over months ago. I ended it. I know that too, I said. It doesn't change what I know now. What does that mean? I poured my tea. I sat down across from her. It means I loved you completely, I said. And you treated it like a problem to manage. I'm not angry at you, Priya. But I can't unknow what I know. And I can't go back to being the man who sat in this kitchen at midnight and told himself stories. She reached across the table. I didn't take her hand. That moment, her hand on the table between us, mine wrapped around a mug of tea I wasn't even tasting, that's where part one ends. Not with a slammed door. Not with shouting. Not with a dramatic scene. With a hand I didn't take. Because here's what I understood sitting at that table. She hadn't rushed home that night because she was afraid of losing me. She'd rushed home because she was afraid of losing the version of me she'd taken for granted. The one who would fold. The one who would absorb the impact and apologize for bleeding. She rushed home because my okay had finally, after 3 years, sounded like what it actually was. Final. And I understood, in the quiet of that kitchen, that I hadn't just lost a marriage. I had lost the belief, the long, stubborn, beautiful, foolish belief, that the person who held your hand at the altar was the same person sitting across from you now. Some people grow together. We had grown in opposite directions without either of us saying a word about it. And all it took was one word, okay, to make the distance visible. The papers were filed 3 weeks later. She didn't fight it. I think part of her had expected me to pull back, to call Arun again and say forget it, we're trying counseling, give us 6 months. I think she was waiting for the version of me she'd trained. He didn't show up. The version who showed up served her the papers on a Tuesday morning and then went to work. She called 4 times that day. I let all 4 go to voicemail. That evening I listened to them in the parking lot of the office. The first was disbelief. The second was tears. The third was anger, you're really doing this? Fine, fine, don't expect me to beg. The fourth was silence. Just her breathing for a moment, then. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm actually sorry. I sat with that for a long time. Then I drove home. Here's what nobody tells you about leaving a marriage, even one that needed to end. The silence is not peaceful at first. The house doesn't feel like freedom initially. It feels like the aftermath of a flood, everything still in its place, technically, but waterlogged. Her coffee mug still in the cabinet. Her throw blanket still on the couch. The smell of her shampoo on the pillow she stopped sleeping on. I moved things. Slowly. One shelf at a time. The coffee mug went in a box. The blanket went to the donation bag. I bought new pillows. Each small thing felt enormous. Not because I wanted her back. But because removing someone from a shared life is 1,000 tiny amputations, and none of them are painless, even when they're necessary. 2 months in, the mutual friends started splitting. This is the part nobody prepares you for. The couple friends, the ones you built dinners and vacations around, suddenly don't know what to do with only half of the equation. Some of them reached out to me. A few reached out to her. Most of them just went quiet, as if the divorce was something contagious they didn't want to get too close to. Ravi and Simone. A couple we'd been close to for years, who'd come to our wedding, who'd spent New Year's with us every year for a decade, texted me once. Hey man, heard what's happening. Let us know if you need anything. I never heard from them again. I don't blame them. Couples form a kind of unit, and when one half of another couple breaks off, it disrupts the geometry of everything. Nobody knows where to sit anymore. But it is lonely. It is genuinely, deeply, practically lonely in a way that hit me around month 3, when I realized that the social architecture of my adult life had been built almost entirely around being Priya's husband. The dinners were her friends. The vacations were her itinerary. The couple friendships were maintained by her warmth, her follow-through, her social fluency. Without her, I was standing in a structure she'd built, and it didn't hold without her in it. She moved out at the end of month 2. Took what was hers. Left what was mine. Split the middle ground the way the lawyers told us to, fairly, technically, without drama. We were never the couple who threw things or burned belongings. Even the ending was polite. That almost made it worse. Her last day in the house, she stood at the front door with the final box and looked around the living room the way you look at something you're memorizing. Then she looked at me. I keep thinking about who we were when we moved in here, she said. Me too, I said. I'm sorry I became someone you couldn't trust. I nodded. There wasn't anything else to say. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't performing. She was genuinely, quietly sorry, the kind of sorry that comes too late to fix anything but too real to dismiss. Take care of yourself, Priya, I said. She picked up her box. She walked out. The door closed. I sat down on the floor of the living room, not the couch, the floor, and just breathed for a while. Not crying. Not relieved. Just present. Just in it. Month 4, I discovered something I hadn't known. I don't mean I found new information about the affair. I'd gotten what I needed, knew what I needed to know, and had made my peace with the limits of what I wanted to understand. What I discovered was something different. I discovered I didn't know who I was without her. Not in a romantic, she completed me way. In a practical, architectural way. My schedule had been built around her schedule. My weekends had been structured around her preferences. My social life, my dinner habits, my weekend rhythms, all of it had been constructed around the center point of being her husband. And now that the center point was gone, I didn't know what I actually liked. What I actually wanted. Who I actually was at 38 when no one needed me to be anything. That was the quietest crisis of the entire year. Not the paperwork. Not the logistics. Not even the loneliness. The stillness of a Saturday morning with no plans. No obligations, no one to consider, and not knowing what to do with any of it. I started running. I don't know why. I'm not a runner. I'd never been a runner. But one morning in month 5 I put on shoes and went outside and just moved, and something about the mechanical simplicity of it, one foot, then the other, no decisions required, felt like the only honest thing I could do. I ran every morning for 3 months before I enjoyed it. Then one morning, somewhere on a path by the river, I realized I was enjoying it. Really enjoying it. Not performing enjoyment for anyone, not documenting it, not thinking about whether she'd be impressed, not doing it for any reason except that it felt good to be in my body in the morning with the light coming off the water. That was the first genuinely new thing I discovered about myself. I kept looking for more. Month 7, Dev called. We'd stayed in contact, careful, quiet contact, the kind you maintain when someone did you an uncomfortable kindness and you don't quite know how to hold it. He asked how I was doing. I told him the truth for once, not great, but better, and improving. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've always thought you were one of the better men I know, Marcus. I'm sorry it cost you this much to find out." She agreed. I didn't know what to say to that. I just said, "Thank you for telling me. A year ago. Even though it was hard." "I almost didn't," he said. "I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was nothing." "It wasn't nothing." "No," he said. "It wasn't." We talked for another hour. About other things. About his kids and my running and a trip he was planning. Normal things. But that conversation, that quiet acknowledgement between two men that honesty had been the right choice even when it hurt, was one of the more important conversations of my year. Here's what I didn't expect. I didn't expect to hear about her being okay. I think part of me, the part that had quietly, uncharitably expected her to fall apart without the stability of our marriage, expected the reports to come back a certain way. Expected to hear she was struggling, isolated, regretting it all in some visible, measurable way. That's not what I heard. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, a mutual friend mentioned casually that Priya seemed to be doing well. Was spending more time with her family. Had taken a trip to Portugal she'd been talking about for years. Was in therapy. I sat with that for a while. It didn't make me angry. It didn't sting the way I thought it might. What it did was simpler and stranger than either of those things. It made me feel something I hadn't expected to feel. Good. Genuinely good. Not generous, performed good. Actual relief. Because here's what I'd come to understand over a year of running in silence and rebuilding. I didn't leave because I hated her. I didn't leave because I wanted her to suffer. I left because what we had become was making both of us worse, her into someone who could look at her husband and feel nothing but irritation, me into someone who had learned to shrink. If she was doing better, that meant I'd made the right call. It meant it was the right ending for both of us. But it gets complicated. Because knowing someone is okay doesn't erase the archaeology of a shared life. It doesn't unexist the version of her I fell in love with at that wedding, the laughing woman across the room, the one I drove through rain for, the one who knew how I took my coffee without asking and texted me stupid things at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays just to make me smile. That person existed. That marriage existed. And grief doesn't require an enemy. Sometimes it just requires time. Month 11, I did something I hadn't done since the divorce began. I went back and looked at photos. Not out of masochism. Not to punish myself. I was helping my mother with something on her phone. She'd been asking me to sort through some old pictures, and there we were. A birthday party, 6 years back. Her face turned up toward mine, mid-laugh. My arm around her. Both of us unself-conscious in a way that people only are when they feel genuinely safe. I looked at that photo for a long time. I thought about the man in it. He was happy. He was real. He was loving someone with his whole chest without calculating the risk. I don't regret being that man. I only regret that it wasn't enough to make her choose us. She didn't leave because I wasn't enough. She left because she'd stopped choosing, and I'd let her get away with not choosing for years. The divorce was finalized 13 months after that night in the hallway. 13 months from don't like it, then divorced me to a judge's signature and a set of papers in a manila folder. I drove home from the courthouse alone. Parked in the driveway. Sat there for a few minutes. I thought about saying something, out loud, to nobody, to myself, something that marked the moment. Some declaration. I didn't say anything. I just went inside. Made dinner. Ate at the kitchen table. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence in the house felt like mine. I'm 39 now. 2 years since she walked out in the red dress. I still run every morning. I've gotten faster. I cook more than I used to, not for anyone, just because it turns out I actually enjoy it when it's not weighted with obligation. I've rebuilt my social life from scratch, slowly, deliberately, with people who know me as just Marcus rather than Marcus and Priya. I'm not with anyone. I'm not rushing toward anyone. I'm learning, for the first time in over a decade, what it feels like to take up space in my own life without apologizing for it. Dev and I have dinner every few months. He is one of the best people I know. I don't know where Priya is now, exactly. I hear things occasionally through the family overlap that's unavoidable. She's still in the city, still in therapy, still, apparently, figuring things out. I genuinely hope she does. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. I know that love is not the same as loyalty, and that you can love someone who has stopped being loyal to you without that meaning you're obligated to stay. I know that the version of me who sat at that kitchen table waiting for her to come home at 4 a.m. had confused devotion with self-erasure. I know that okay was the most powerful word I ever said. Not because it wounded her. Because it finally told the truth. She handed me a door. I walked through it. And on the other side was a life I'd forgotten I was allowed to want.